keep in mind we're human and we're bound to fuck things up, myself included. Always double check the numbers. If you read something that I wrote that's been published, there's probably going to be a typo in there somewhere. It's simply how it works. But most people that dance in these circles don't want to admit it. It's just how it works. I mean, it's not going to be as bad as Stephenie Meyer Twilight, but it's bound to happen to varying degrees. So, yeah. Case in point, the 9/11 video that I'm still debating on leaving online. When I first knocked it out, for some reason, instead of writing 2001 on the chalkboard, I kept writing 2011 on the chalkboard. So I need to go back and refilm that clip and or leave something like this, a disclaimer statement that explains that I needed to pull my head out of my ass in the moment because I had too many thoughts in my head and I was trying to teach people things and I was going too fast for my own good. Reason I'm rattling this off is I think I'm going to leave a test question online, and it's probably going to precede one of those videos that I've made here and there, urban archaeology, if you will, here in one of many cities in the States. And what this has to do with in particular is magic squares. And by degrees, it has to do with what our masters get up to. They spoon feed you something that means nothing, is fuck all, and it goes nowhere. And people repeat it because people don't think about it. People don't challenge it. And it becomes the norm. And this happens across the board. Today, I mean, normalization or normalizing things, and then people just run with it. Right now, you'll hear all sorts of phony fucking narratives having to do with Atlantis. I mean, growing up, we knew precious little, next to nothing, about Atlantis. What's his name? Solus? Is it Solon? I'm trying to remember his name, but if you look into it, a different fellow brought Plato that tale of Atlantis, and Plato ran with it. It's one of those things, and then it becomes a game of telephone. And people buy into it. And the more you're subjected to it, the more it breaks you down, and the more likelihood, or the better likelihood of you repeating it. That's poorly worded. You're more likely to repeat it, is what I'm getting at. Another great example is all things test tube aliens. And people talk about it as if it's fact. It's absolute nonsense. Yeah. But this is how it works. And so our masters will give you something that does reflect reality, and it's lesser magic, but it's bound to be dressed up in shit that goes nowhere, means nothing, and is fuck all. It's complete misdirection, and people will repeat it, which means they're going to piss in the pond and obscure what does reflect reality. And every single package you see, for the most part, online, I'd really, personally, most days, it sure as shit seems like every package you find online is clouded in this heap of horse shit. Here's one such example, and who knows if this is an older book. Let me preface it with this, since I'm so long-winded. It's an older book. It has to do with magic squares. A lot of people aren't familiar with it for some reason, even though some of these kids are dancing through planetary magic squares, which are really wandering stars. And then you got other personalities online that are well circulated for some reason, even though they constantly repost the same slop on their Instagram, if you keep up with them, because they don't have answers to reality, and or they're taking people for a ride. If you look up the personality Jane108, the fellow with the little ponytail, that's got a super creepy voice, in my opinion. Jane108. The gal in my life told me not too long back that he was giving away a free book. As it turns out, it was an e-book. Big surprise. Sweet of him to dish up something for free. I think there's something to that, but I knew that there was going to be a dollar amount. He was going to want some green paper from me, some greenbacks. He's going to want to essentially steal hours of my life in exchange for him posting the same shit on Instagram regularly. And yeah, after a while, he courted me, or maybe that's not one way to put it. He schmoozed me, or whoever was working for him that was talking to me schmoozed me, because they also didn't use the speech patterns Jane typically does. So I don't think it was him. I think he has a team of assholes who does this, but maybe I'm wrong. Either way, he talked to me for a while to finally try to build my confidence, and then he sent me a link. And when you scroll to the bottom of this fairly extensive page, it finally asks you for $1,000 or more and your credit card information. And naturally, I told him I'm not interested. This is fucking pointless. I'm not going to do this. Yeah. The reason I mention that is Jane108 is one of the only people online that I've seen mention this book. Now, at first blush, most people will probably run with this. At first blush, most people probably won't work out the magic square on the cover of the goddamn book. And if you do, it's a magic square for the number 42. Now, the reason I've been rattling all this shit off and taking fucking forever to do so is, one, it's in my wheelhouse, and two, I'm looking for good people who have an attention span, who are worth their salt, capable of abstract thought, and willing to put in the time. This magic square is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And my test question for folks, and I'm going to give you another magic square, and I'm going to show you the one that's correct, and I'm going to ask you to explain to me why that is when you compare the two. So give me a second. I'll put some chalk on the board. And yeah, I'm looking for an answer. I want somebody to chime in. I want you to use the brain between your ears. And I want you to explain to me why this is wrong and the other one's right. It's very simple. But the only way you're going to figure it out, unless you've already been doing these things, is to work with it. Sit with it and work with it. Don't force it. Just fuck around with it for a bit, and you'll see what I'm getting at. But you have to work with what I consider the angles, because there are nothing but angles to reality. In other words, permutations, iterations, angles to the same fucking thing. You can look at this book how many different ways? Just like you could look at this magic square how many different ways? You won't have to turn the square to figure it out. You can use this 2D format of the 9 square for the quote-unquote 42, magic square as seated in this book. If you look up this book, it's quite old, and it's fairly inexpensive. So if you are into magic squares, you should pick it up. It's worth a damn. But it blows me away that the magic square on the cover of the book is absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. If you're into this type of thing and you're familiar with, is it Durer, Albrecht Dürer? That, what the fuck was he? Was he Freemason? I'm trying to remember if he was a Freemason offhand. The guy that knocked out the Melancholia magic square hidden in that painting associated with that shitty film that Kristen Dunst was in. It has to do with lesser magic. It has to do with what most people consider Nibiru and dumb fucking shit along those lines. But it does have to do with a point in time that we're building up to, and it's not a good day. It's not a good day at all. The reason I'm rattling that off is, I see where my books are hidden, and they're hidden behind other books. That's why I'm not seeing them. It's a 34 magic square, and the one seated in the painting is in fact correct. So if you wanted to take another one, you could use that to try to work things out. If I'm not mistaken, that's a 4x4, so it might not be as easy. So what you might want to do is take the seal of Saturn, it's a 3x3, having to do with the number 9 and having to do with Saturn L or Satan L. It has to do with fucking Mother Earth. It has to do with what you and I are made from and where we are, what this is, how it works, and black magic by definition. And if you want to take that and use that, it's a 15 magic square. And maybe I'll write that on the board too, just so you can compare and contrast. But in particular, I want you to work with these 42s. I was trying to see if I had one of those Dwyer books lying around somewhere else, but I think they're all just wedged behind other books at the moment. You can look it up. Look up Melancholia Magic Square and you'll find it. There's a couple YouTube videos out there that explain it. It's pretty simple. And if you run through how they're working that jazz out, it might help you to understand what I'm asking you to do. Assuming anybody sees this. Because the internet censors me for some reason. Imagine that. All right, I'm going to put the chalk on the board. All right, so I'm going to throw these two 42 magic squares on the board. And I'm looking for somebody to answer why one of them works and one of them doesn't. One of them is not a magic fucking square. But it's on the cover of that book. So you got an 8, you got a 12, you got a 22. And this is the one that does not work. Keep in mind, it will add up to 42. So if that confuses you, I need you to think about it. So that's the one that's phony fucking horse shit. Let's see if this one will work. Stopped using actual chalk a ways back for a number of reasons, so this is interesting using this jazz. Let's see. So you're gonna have this. Hopefully this isn't frame. We'll see in a minute. Definitely out of practice, to say the very least, with recording this type of shit for people. We got this, and that. And this is a 10, even though it's kind of sloppy. It's really sloppy. Oh yeah, and I said I'd throw the 15 magic square on there too for good measure. So let's just do it way up here. Let's see if I'm doing it right. And ironically, there's a 42 in there, just so you know. And then you got a 3, 5, 7, and then it should be an 8, 1, 6. Might as well do this. Yeah, this one's going to hell. And keep in mind, these are 42s. And this one up here is a 15. And the only ones I want you to work with, whoops, I meant to do it that way, are the bottom two. I want you to tell me why one of these works and why one of them does not work. Yeah, you can see it. This is okay. The other thing you probably should look at is for both of the 42 magic squares, the 12 is in the same spot. I just find it curious. It's not terribly important to appreciate that, but the 12 didn't move. There's a few other numbers in there, if I'm not mistaken, that still carry over, like the 18, 15. But other numbers were added, which means if you add each one of these up separately, they're going to equal a different amount collectively. But each column is still going to knock out 42. All right. I'm looking for good people, worth their salt, capable of abstract thought, and all that stuff I always rattle off. Hopefully humans see this and not bots. Yeah, wishful thinking on my end. Thanks for hanging out. And remember, this is a test question. I'm looking for a fucking answer. Here's an addendum. I said I'm looking for an answer. I apologize for the glare right now. But this isn't the answer, just so you know. If you were to add up this, this, and this, it's not going to be 42. And the same should apply for this. That's not what I'm looking for.